Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about something. US Vice President Pence laughed heartily, saying that Trump had won, but the media lamented that the tariff war was actually being paid for by Americans. American scholars also sighed, saying that looking back over the past 60 years, China has thoroughly defeated the US thanks to its stable policies. Recently, Trump secured an alliance of achievements with the EU, which made his cabinet officials extremely happy. But the general consensus among American media is that although Trump has recently signed a bunch of trade agreements, these are Trump's successes but America's failures, and they won't be able to save American manufacturing. US Vice President Pence strongly praised Trump, saying that all the European media are now showering Trump with praise and are amazed at how he represented Americans in negotiating and reaching this US-EU trade agreement. Trump does indeed need a political victory. The New York Times said that this agreement might allow Trump to shift the media spotlight away from the Ireland scandal, a controversy that has plagued him for several weeks. At the beginning of July, some Democratic senators mocked Trump, saying that back in April, Trump promised the world he would secure 90 trade agreements within 90 days. But according to his count, Trump is still short by 88 agreements, meaning he has only reached deals with the UK and China. Now, with this timely so-called trade war victory, Trump has managed to quiet some of the criticism. But it's not just Europeans who are paying the price for Trump's victory, Americans are, too. According to the BBC, ordinary Americans are already outraged by the rising cost of living, and this US-EU trade agreement will raise the price of EU imports of American goods, further increasing the burden on Americans. A 15% tariff will already cause a significant increase in prices. Because companies that sell foreign goods to the US have to pay taxes to the US government, they usually pass on part or even all of the extra tariff costs to American consumers. Of course, a major issue is that foreign media generally believe that Trump's wave of tariff increases won't be able to save American manufacturing, because it does nothing to address the root causes of the industry's decline in the US. In the end, the real winner is still China. This is true because, while Trump wages a tariff war, he embraces old energy and suppresses new energy, making American media more despairing. Latest data from China's General Administration of Customs shows, in the first half of this year, China's total import and export value reached 21.8 trillion yuan. The so-called new trio electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, and solar cells have become the new driving force of China's foreign trade exports, with export momentum that is extremely strong. In the first half, China's electromechanical product exports were 7.8 trillion yuan, a 9.5% increase, making up 60% of all exports. High-end equipment, linked to new quality productive forces, grew over 20%. Products of the green and low-carbon new trio grew by 12.7%. Some American media, faced with China's impressive foreign trade performance, can't hide their mixed feelings, lamenting that clean energy technologies like electric vehicles, lithium batteries, and solar panels were originally invented in the United States, but now China dominates the global market. In theory, the United States could have held a global leadership position in these new fields, so why did it ultimately lose its early advantage? And what enabled China to overtake and surpass them? On these questions, many American experts believe that China's success comes down to two main factors. First, policy stability, and second, vigorous promotion of new technology applications. On July 31, David Kish, a professor of management and entrepreneurship at the University of Maryland, admitted in an interview that looking back over the 56 years since 1969, the inconsistency of U.S. policy is truly shocking, while China, with its consistently stable policies, has completely outperformed the United States. And Gregory Nemeth, a professor of public affairs at the University of Wisconsin, said that although the United States has many technological inventions, it has never focused on cultivating domestic market demand. In contrast, while China encourages manufacturers to produce new technologies, it has consistently promoted consumer acceptance of these new technologies. He said that the success of technology requires a combination of technological opportunities and market opportunities. The United States is very good at creating technological opportunities, but its support for the market is far from sufficient. First, let's look at electric vehicles. As early as the 1930s, the United States began gradually promoting large-scale electrification. But at the same time, oil companies had already established convenient gasoline distribution networks across the country, making gasoline-powered cars more popular with consumers. The rate of improvement in internal combustion engine technology far outpaced that of electric technology. Ford's assembly line enabled the rapid mass production of new gasoline cars. At that time, there were hardly any electric vehicles on American roads. More than 50 years later, in the 1980s, the United States saw a turning point. Back then, California, in an effort to improve air quality and reduce vehicle emissions, required car manufacturers to sell a certain number of electric vehicles. General Motors quickly launched the two-seater electric car EV1, which soon became popular in California. In the mid-1990s, California regulators abandoned this plan. GM quietly took back these cars and destroyed them. America's focus shifted back to traditional gasoline vehicles. America's dominance in the field of gasoline vehicles also, to some extent, prompted China to decide to enter the electric vehicle sector. Around 2010, China was searching for technological fields where Chinese companies could dominate in the coming decades. Over the past decade or so, the Chinese government has vigorously promoted electric vehicles, introducing multiple incentive policies such as purchase subsidies, exemption from purchase tax, and exclusive license plates for electric cars. Domestic manufacturers have also benefited from industry support policies, including tax reductions and accelerated factory approval processes. According to estimates by the U.S. think tank Center for Strategic and International Studies, the Chinese government has invested about $231 billion to promote electric vehicles, and this investment has yielded remarkable results. In 2010, the annual sales of electric vehicles in both China and the United States had just surpassed 1,000 units. But by last year, 14 years later, the U.S. sold 1.2 million electric vehicles, while China reached 6.4 million units. China has far surpassed the United States. U.S. media believe that during the Trump administration, as Congress cut back on electric vehicle incentive policies, the gap between the two countries may widen even further. Mazwa Ko, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, is even more concerned, saying that the U.S. faces a real risk of technological isolation in the automotive sector. In addition, the development trajectory of lithium-ion batteries is also similar to that of electric vehicles. In the early 1970s, Whittingham from ExxonMobil in the United States was the first to invent a functional lithium-ion battery. Harvard economists and Japanese scientists continuously improved this new technology, which was initially applied to electronic products such as notebook computers and mobile phones in the 1990s, and by the 21st century, it gradually began to be used in electric vehicles. In 2009, under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act signed by President Obama, the U.S. Department of Energy provided several $100 million in funding to a 123, an American company that was an early producer of lithium iron phosphate batteries. However, since the United States was not promoting the growth of electric vehicle sales at that time, it was clearly difficult for early battery companies to gain traction in a market dominated by cars and trucks. A 123 eventually went bankrupt and was acquired by a Chinese company. In the early 2010s, as electric vehicle sales surged in China, the country not only invested billions of dollars in battery technology research, development, and manufacturing, but also ramped up investment in the processing of key minerals like cobalt, lithium, and graphite, adding stability to the complex battery supply chain. And then, China's battery industry completely took off. Today, China accounts for 85% of the world's battery production capacity, with an even more pronounced advantage in the field of electric vehicle batteries. Lithium iron phosphate batteries produced in China make up 94% of global usage. Now, let's look at solar panels. As an iconic American invention, their development has been even more complicated. In 1954, Bell Labs in the United States announced the creation of the world's first commercial solar cell. In the 1970s, the U.S. solar industry flourished. To address the oil crisis, the U.S. government invested millions of dollars in research and development, attracting talent from around the world. President Carter even installed 32 solar panels on the White House roof. In 1978, 95% of the world's solar industry was concentrated in the United States. However, just 2 years later, at the beginning of the 1980s, Reagan, backed by oil interests, came to power. He claimed that growth was now the priority and drastically cut funding for renewable energy and solar research, ultimately driving down costs by stimulating traditional energy sources. Reagan even went so far as to remove all the solar panels Carter had installed on the White House roof. Reagan's administration is also seen as marking the end of a decade of environmental progress in the United States. Laments from the University of Wisconsin said that in just a few years, the U.S. solar energy budget was slashed by 85%. Germany and Japan quickly filled the gap left by the U.S. withdrawal, attracting a large number of experienced solar engineers and scientists. By the early 21st century, Europe was providing massive subsidies for wind and solar installations. Sensing a business opportunity, Chinese companies also began large-scale production of solar panels. Mazako from the Center for Strategic and International Studies explained that Chinese companies benefited from Europe's incentive policies. In the early to mid-2000s, as market demand surged, Chinese firms rapidly built factories to meet this demand. Although after 2008, Europe shifted to fiscal austerity due to the financial crisis and ended subsidies for solar energy, China did not abandon the continued development of its solar industry like the United States did. To date, China has invested $50 billion in new solar power generation capacity, accounting for 80% of the global solar supply chain. Currently, 8 of the world's top 10 solar panel manufacturers are from China, while the remaining 2 are located in India and Singapore. None are from the United States. As the media summarizes, the rise of these 3 new industries clearly shows a simple truth: the birth of a technology is only the starting point. It is sustained policy support, market cultivation, and deep development of the industrial chain that can turn a first-mover advantage into a leading position. With steady strategic resolve and a comprehensive ecosystem, China has enabled technologies born in the United States to take root, flourish, and ultimately become a major force in the global green transition. Or, to put it another way, let's summarize the American media's summary. First, the frequent shifts in U.S. policy are related to the two-party politics of American-style democracy. Policies promoted by the Democratic Party are rolled back when the Republicans come to power, and vice versa. This is a kind of structural internal friction, and it's a fundamental flaw of Western democracy. In contrast, China's policies are consistent and don't change with leadership transitions. This is a key advantage of China's system. Second, behind the shifts in U.S. policy, there are traces of manipulation by 3 levels of government, all serving the interests of oil companies and car manufacturers. When Carter promoted solar energy, he threatened the interests of the oil companies, so they backed Reagan to push Carter out of office. The interests of America's 3 layers of government outweigh the interests of the nation. Third, the tariff war that Trump is waging now is just a crude act of grabbing, and it won't change the structure of American industry. If the U.S. is losing, it will just keep on losing.